It is the 200 level Mike Carpenter in the basement studio on a snowy, cold Sunday morning. Just the kind of stuff that puts you in a great mood after a disappointing evening at the State Farm Center. Let me come out with a bit of hyperbole, if I may. Maybe it's not hyperbole. That was the worst loss of the Brad Underwood era since Loyola. I will give you plenty of reasons why. You may agree with that from the first time you hear it, or you may think, Carp, that's a little bit dramatic. Either reaction would be fine, but given the circumstances of last night, given the must-win nature, given the schedule coming up, the crowd, which was absolutely electric, one of the best atmospheres that has been in that stadium in some time, remembering Terrence Shannon Jr. for what he accomplished here, and all of that wasn't enough. And not only did you lose that game, but you did so in such pathetic fashion that it calls into question some macro questions, some macro concerns about Brad Underwood going forward. Now, in order for us to have a productive conversation here and not get so far into the weeds where we are calling for someone's job, I don't think Brad Underwood should be fired. I don't. But I am losing faith in him as a coach. I'm losing faith in Brad Underwood as someone that can make the necessary adjustments in a game. I'm losing faith in Brad Underwood as a coach who can maximize the talent he has on the court. It is year 8. It's been a pretty darn good 8 years. There were 3 banners to speak of and an Elite 8 appearance. And when you consider where this program was when he inherited it, you are in a far better position. And if this program moves on from Brad Underwood because it's, after 12, 13 years and it's time to do so, or if he chooses to go somewhere else, his legacy is mostly going to be very positive because of what he got you out of. But I want Illini fans to be careful, too, when we're having these conversations today. Some of which will be about the game that we saw, and some of which will be about the program going forward. Just because he got you to a certain point does not mean that you cannot criticize or ask for a better performance from your coach. Brad Underwood got you out of the depths of irrelevancy. That is true. However, Josh Whitman, as an athletic director, has gotten this entire program to a place where they've not been in a long time. And by program, I mean the entire athletic program, not just basketball. You are putting the resources into this thing to be a top 12, top 10 caliber basketball program, and that is not bearing out with this team. Now, it did last year. Thank you, Terrence Shannon Jr. and Marcus Damask and Coleman Hawkins. That was a really good collection of veteran guys, and that worked. And credit to Underwood for building that roster. But he made a calculated decision after last season that we're going to draw it all up again. Whatever happened against UConn cannot happen again. Therefore, I have a new paradigm for how I'm going to build this roster with NBA talent, with supreme offensive ability. That's going to get us over the hump. And instead, what we've seen is not just will this team not get anywhere close to what last year's team did, but they were in danger of being a one and done, what the hell was that kind of proposition. Bear in mind, we saw last night there were 2 top 20 players on that court. You got Kasper Siakachonis, who, yes, he will still be a lottery pick. I know he had maybe some frustrations down the stretch, but we see it. The NBA sees it. Dude's a lottery pick. Will Riley, probably top 20, top 25. They're gone. One and done. See ya. Thank you guys for what they did because they're really good, but what do you have to show for it? And on top of that, you're seeing in the games these absolutely head-scratching rotations, lack of playing certain players for whatever reason, and then so frustratingly, on the other side of these games, you get to the press conference, and Brad Underwood will admit, I screwed up. Well, stop screwing up, $4.5 million man. Stop screwing up in the middle of a huge freaking game. Stop losing by double digits at home, which his team has done not once, not twice, but thrice this year to Big Ten opponents at home. Good news for Illinois, this is the first ranked team that actually beat you by double digits at home. The other two were unranked. Stop finding yourself in the post game acknowledging that I didn't do this, that, and the other correctly, and do it correctly in the game. Last night was a total abomination of a coaching job. And yes, if I'm throwing around words that make it sound bigger than it is, I don't know, maybe I am, but I will say this. Having perused the message boards and perused Twitter this morning, Illini fans are pissed off. Hence the opening comment I made. The worst loss of the Brad Underwood era since Loyola. And I think the things that are sticking in our craw this morning will stick in our craw for the rest of this season and linger into the offseason. There is no on-off switch for the amount of suck that we saw last night. That is not just going to magically go away. So now we got to sit in it and enter a week in which you play at Wisconsin, red hot. I don't know if I even want to watch that game. I mean, you thought last night was bad. I worry now about the mental component of this. I worry about the fact that a Dre Gibbs Lawhorn, who actually, exudes the toughness and everyday guy's mantra that Brad Underwood continues to pretend is actually the mantra appropriate for his program, and play him 6 minutes. Trey White, not on the injury report. No illness, no injury. 0 minutes. Jake Davis looked great. 14. Benham Rickhouse, 31. Sometimes you can boil it down to the simplest things. You can look at a box score and say, that doesn't make sense. Why is that? And Brad Underwood took accountability for some of it. I would just appreciate, though, if maybe instead of having to take accountability for boneheaded mistakes, you didn't make the boneheaded mistakes in the first place. So what are we left with, with Brad Underwood at this point? Maybe stubborn is the word. I've given him credit before on this podcast, many times, in fact. And in the book, the Illini basketball book that I wrote, thinking, hey, we finally figured it out. We finally got it. Brad Underwood has this thing rolling. And then this season, whatever the hell this is, we're looking at a coach, I fear, that is losing the plot with this team. It's February 15th. We are 3 full months into this thing, 3+ months into this season, and they are getting objectively worse. At their peak, they were 7th, 8th, 7th on KenPom. They had a top 20 offense and a top 20 defense. They are nosediving. They are plummeting. They're 20th on the metrics on KenPom, but that is based on the strength of earlier this season. If you were to take the last month, I'd venture to say they're probably in the 40s somewhere. And if one were to say, well, Carp, it could be worse and it has been worse, that is 100% accurate. And that's why Brad Underwood is not going to get fired, nor should he get fired after this year. You don't fire a guy a year removed from an Elite Eight and a Big Ten tournament title and everything that he has accomplished here. Tangible accomplishments. But what you can do, and what I would imagine are some conversations going on within that athletic department, you can have legitimate concerns about Brad Underwood as an actual coach. As a coach. Because no one is doubting his ability to go out and accrue talent. We see it on the court. That is a talented team. It is a more talented team than Michigan State, but they are not as good of a team as Michigan State. And that right there, Tom Izzo is a very high bar to clear. He's having one of his best seasons in a 30-year career. I'm not going to ask Brad Underwood to be Tom Izzo, but I would like for him to be just a few notches above where he's at right now. And these are going to be questions going into the offseason about the staff and how do you address it. Should Tyler Underwood, should he be the offensive wunderkind on the sideline being in the right ear of his dad? Probably not. Is it Zach Hamer? I keep hearing this name. He's the defensive guru. Should he be the guy running the defense? Okay, well, probably not. Should Orlando Antigua and Jeff Alexander be there? Yes. They bring in dudes. Brad Underwood brings in dudes. But you have got to figure something out this offseason. When it comes to strategizing within a game, this staff needs a complete reshuffle. If we do not see that, you should be pissed, and you should be very wary going into next season, because Terrence Shannon Jr. is not walking through that door. Marcus Damask is a unicorn in terms of portal hits that work out far beyond your expectations. Ayo Dosunmu is not walking through that door, and neither is Kofi Coburn. What you will be left with, in all likelihood, and you hope so at least, is a Merez Johnson and a Tomislav Ivasic. Kylan? Dre? You think Dre Gibbs Lawhorn owes this program a damn thing anymore? I hope he stays. But how many post-game apologies is it going to require for Brad Underwood to convince Dre Gibbs Lawhorn that he actually likes him? What more does a player have to do to get in a game? I'm just a little bit perturbed. And one more point before I get to the sponsors. If this seems like a scattershot Jackson Pollock kind of podcast, just pissed off about this, pissed off about that, I do apologize. It's probably not going to be my most eloquent work. But before I get to the sponsors, I'd be remiss if I didn't go back to the very beginning of this season. You get this roster put together. We're excited about it. I'm excited about it. Who wasn't? All these new toys, let's see how it works. The opening game, we find out an hour or so beforehand that Ty Rodgers is redshirting. Okay, well, as I explained it way back then, Trey White was probably Ty Rodgers with a jump shot. And Ty and the coaches likely had conversations where they thought it was best that, hey, save this season, work on your jump shot, and we'll go from there. For a program that continues to use hashtag everyday guys and plays Dre Gibbs Longhorn 6 minutes and tells Ty freaking Rodgers, redshirt, you aren't good enough to get in the rotation, and now we're February 15th and we aren't even playing Trey White a single minute of a game, ask yourself, what kind of grave miscalculation is that from a head coach making $4.5 million with a top 12 NIL budget? What kind of grave miscalculation is that? To me, out of all the things I could point at Underwood and say, dude, you missed the boat on this, I will start with game one of this season and Ty Rodgers taking the red shirt and 3 months later finding out that his replacement, de facto replacement, is now apparently in the doghouse. And ask yourself, what the hell is going on? That's the situation we find ourselves in right now. It's not good enough. It's plain and simple, not good enough. And he continues to say, I'm accountable. Fine. But I hope the athletic director and the people above him hold Brad Underwood accountable as well. And this offseason is going to go a long way in determining what Brad Underwood's future looks like in the next 2-3 years at Illinois, if it goes that far. But I'm pissed. You're pissed. The fans are pissed. That was a blunder of exceptional magnitude last night, and to be in attendance for it, to go from the highest of highs to walking out of there shaking your head thinking, what did I just watch, is a frustrating place to be in year 8 of a coach who claims that he has national title aspirations, and instead his team is laying a complete egg as we find ourselves in the middle of February. All right, the 200 level is brought to you by Hamilton Walkers. Downtown Champaign, steak, seafood, and spirits. You might need to wash this one away with a nice old-fashioned at Hamilton Walkers. I will say this, that it's impossible to go to Hamilton Walkers and leave in a bad mood. It's impossible. So if you need to give yourself a break, cleanse the palate with absolutely delicious food from their Scratch Kitchen. And you could go there for a pregame or something like that. I mean, listen, if you do that, you're at least going to walk into State Farm Center being in a good mood. Can't say what you're going to feel like afterwards. But I do appreciate Hamilton Walkers. As far as restaurants in Champaign-Urbana, of which there are many good ones, they are at the very top, and we are very lucky to have them as part of the podcast. So that's Hamilton Walkers, steak, seafood, and spirits in downtown Champaign. Also, got to thank Owen Builders, LLC, online at owenbuildersllc.com. Check out a gallery of their work online and get a free quote while you're at it at owenbuildersllc.com. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. Dogtown, thankfully, they are our HVAC people, and our furnace has been kicking butt in what has been a cold, miserable winter. I hate cold weather, and this week's not going to be fun. But because of Dogtown and their staff, we don't need to worry about it in our house. We got an old furnace, too. I mean, it's like 25 years old, but they check it. They have done a few maintenance fixes on it, and it is running as well as it could. So I trust them as much as any HVAC company I've ever worked with. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend at 217-841-4728. And finally, got to thank, of course, State Farm agent Brian Hansen, online at brianismyguy.com for life, auto, home, business, renters, you name it. Brian is my guy, and he can be your guy as well for all your insurance needs at brianismyguy.com. Champagne Showers Podcast Network, appreciate them. And appreciate you for tuning in. And I appreciate some of the things coming through the YouTube feed. I had mentioned how on KenPom, if Illinois had a KenPom ranking for just the last month, it wouldn't be very good. But this is from Jacob. Since the Northwestern home game, per Bart Torvik, which is another metrics website, Illinois is 36th in the country. That's 18th offensively, 115th defensively. You know, we'll do a little bit of micro and a little bit of macro. Let's start a little bit of micro. The defense sucks right now. It's just ridiculous. They are letting teams continually get to the rim. Michigan State got everything they wanted to yesterday. Michigan State is kind of a throwback in that they don't mind taking the mid-range jumper, and they've always had good mid-range shooters. I mean, A.J. Hogard, I remember, felt like every game against Michigan State, A.J. Hogard was dropping, 20 points. And Michigan State fans didn't even like him that much, but he was always good against us. I understand the idea that you force teams into those shots, and Michigan State were making them at a higher clip than they had been the last few games, but there seems to be a trend going on. Just look at the box scores of the last month and a half. Even from a pure points scored standpoint, Illinois' defense is not stopping anybody. I mean, we're getting the back and forth with like 10 minutes to go in that second half. And I turned to my friend Kyle, who I went to the game with, and I said to him, we can't stop them. I mean, we're going to have to be perfect on offense in order to pull this win out. Ultimately, you were anything but perfect in offense. But why not? I figured, let's flip it. Let's start defensively before we get to the real matzo ball that's out there, the Illinois offense. This defense isn't good enough. You are continually letting guards get into the lane. I'd say for the first 10 minutes of the game, I was particularly impressed with Merez and Tommy and how they were helping on that. And you were forcing Michigan State into some contested shots. But then Jackson Kohler. And wouldn't you know, it's just this amazing thing with Brad Underwood teams. Yeah, these guys come into the games, and their statistics would suggest that they aren't that great. Now, Bilodeau for UCLA, he was shooting 40% from three. Apparently that wasn't the game plan because you let him get whatever he wanted. In this one, Jackson Kohler was 8 for 34 from three going into that game. So you figure he's not much of a threat. Well, guess what? He made one. Okay. Made two. Maybe by the third one, started adjusting a little bit. But that seems so anathema to what Brad Underwood does as a coach in a game to even consider changing even the most minor of things to keep a guy like Jackson Kohler from getting his career high. I see career high a lot with these opponents whenever they play Brad Underwood teams. It's amazing, isn't it? You would think there'd be a slight little adjustment that he could make. Here's the thing, too, before I get in the offense. If I hear Brad Underwood say one more time, well, I wanted them to do this, but they didn't. Well, I got an easy solution, Brad. Set their ass on the bench if they don't do that. I mean, Dre Gibbs Lawhorn is fresh. 6 minutes, right? If someone out there is not doing what you want them to do, play A.J. Redd. Play Ashton Kutcher's cousin. I don't care. Be a coach. Don't get into the WDWS postgame radio show. And the first thing you said, I'm driving home and I about threw my keys through the freaking windshield when I heard this. When Brad Underwood says, and now we're getting the offense, by the way. When Brad Underwood says, I'll take a drink of coffee. We stopped getting aggressive. I'm paraphrasing. We stopped getting aggressive. We shot too many threes. If only there was something you could do about that. I don't know. If only there was something the head coach, making $4.5 million, who recruited all these guys in the first place, could do about something like that. For the life of me, I can't figure out what that would be. Okay, so we have a coach now saying they aren't doing what I told them to do, which makes me wonder, how good of a coach are you if your messaging is just falling on deaf ears? Seriously, how good of a coach are you? If you are telling your team something, they're like, nah, no thanks. To me, that's not a yellow flag. That's a red flag. That is a major concern for any head coach to say, guys, could you do that? And they're like, nah. But there were some really good points made on Twitter, on the message boards, and I'd give credit to, but a lot of people were saying this, and I mentioned this last night about a short rotation and the effects of that. Essentially, Illinois has boiled it down to a 7-man rotation because I guess Dre is a non-factor in the eyes of Brad Underwood. It's February 15th. Best case scenario, you'd have another 6 weeks left of the season. Yeah, right. But in this stretch run, if you want to tighten the rotation, I get that to a certain extent, but we saw as the game went on, Illinois was settling for threes. Well, why would a team settle for threes? One, mindset, which it's been drilled into this team from Brad Underwood himself, mind you, from the early parts of this year. Keep shooting, fellas. Keep on shooting. Well, that's really sweet. I love the confidence he's trying to instill in them to continue to shoot less than 30% from the three-point line, but it is killing this team. So one is mindset. Two, maybe when you only play 7 guys meaningful minutes, they will be fatigued. And what do you do when you are tired? Well, I'll tell you what you don't do as much. You don't drive the ball to the hoop as much or as effectively. You say, okay, I'm 25 feet away from the basket, but my defender is 7 feet away from me. I'm just going to take it and miss it because you got tired legs. So we get to the end of this game. Michigan State's playing 11 deep. We play 7 deep. It is just unbelievable how Brad Underwood is completely incapable of adjusting on the fly to anything in front of him. Anything. I cannot. Was it 3 minutes, K. Andrew, not 6 for DGL? 3 minutes. Regardless if it was 3 or 6. What the hell are we doing? What are we actually doing? The more I think about last night, the more I talk about it, the more I am completely out on Underwood with this coaching job right now. That's not to say he can't learn from it. And in years past, he has learned from previous mistakes. But I also don't think for a guy who's in his 60s, who's in year 8 at a program, it needs to continue to be a freaking learning experience. You've been coaching your entire life. What happened? And you know what's so ironic about all this? You got Brad Underwood. And I thought he's like an X's and O's guru. According to everything he did, Stephen F. Austin, in the 1 year at Oklahoma State, he was like, wow, this guy is an amazing offensive coach, and we'll see about the recruiting. And then he got Antigua, and it's like, okay, well, clearly recruiting was not going to be an issue for him. So now it's like he got so enamored with, I'm going to go get dudes. I'm going to go get dudes. And then the actual nuts and bolts of being a coach seem to be completely secondary to him. It's really confounding. And I don't know how you get to that point. I mean, I think back to Underwood's, let's say, 3rd year when that team made a turn in January, and you wonder, well, was that X's and O's or was that culture? Was that a team finally buying into what Brad Underwood does best when he's rolling? And hindsight being 2020, I think it was a mix of, yes, the culture was being established and Io was becoming Io and Kofi was really settling in as a freshman, and he had a pretty good supporting cast too. That was pretty experienced in their own way. They'd been through the valleys, and now they were starting to have success. I think that Brad Underwood, his 5th season here, when they won a Big Ten regular season title, I thought that was a very good coaching job through a tumultuous year, which I don't remember him bitching and moaning about injuries nearly as much back then. But he just couldn't shut up about it for the last month. He would not shut up about illness and injury. And now we're whole again, and we're even worse than before. Riddle me this. This is a coach with no answers right now. I mean, think about it. He has no answers. So maybe there is something to not having to completely retool a roster year in, year out. Maybe there's something in continuity, but the way that you're playing this season, you aren't even setting yourself up for continuity next year. You're going to have a completely new backcourt in all likelihood. You could build a roster around Merez and Tommy. That's fine. I like both of those guys. But we're just going to go do it again. And do you have any I mean, as you sit here this morning, and maybe you knew this far before I did, I tried to temper down my fanboy carp tendencies to get all pissed off and stuff. But there have been many people banging the drum that Brad Underwood's not a good coach. Okay, now I say, well, when it comes to X's and O's, he leaves something to be desired, but there's a lot of good things about him. But as we sit here this morning, would anyone actually be excited about Brad Underwood with 8 new faces next year? I wouldn't be. You literally have 2 top 20 picks, and you have not much to show for it. So you got that one right with KJ. You got Will Riley. You got that correct. Tomislav Visic, good pickup. But are you really excited about the prospects of doing this all over again in an offseason? And that Brad Underwood's going to maximize it? I'm not. Why would I be? We aren't seeing it. To make this all worse, and I'm going to get to YouTube, I'm going to get to Twitter. The Terrence Shannon ceremony was great until it wasn't. You know, when you think about what he dealt with last year and the season he had despite that, it is a once-in-a-lifetime kind of performance from a college athlete. Never going to see another Terrence Shannon Jr. again, what he did given those circumstances. So his banner raising was, I thought, more impactful might not be the best word, but I think there was more emotional resonance with his than Kofi's. Kofi was fun. Kofi was great. We loved Kofi. He helped get this program to a certain point that we hadn't been in a long time. So his legacy is secure. With Terrence, there was a little bit more of an emotional attachment, and you felt it in the stadium. I can't even describe to you the reaction and the sound that the crowd made when they unfurled the jersey. And I tried to not think too much of it, and he tried to laugh it off. He probably cares less than others. I mean, think about what he went through last year. And now he's in the NBA. He came out on the other side of it, stronger as a person, I'm sure, for going through incredible adversity. An upside-down banner is like peanuts to him. Big deal, right? The kid's seen some things. That really bothers me the more I think about it. It just makes us look foolish. And it ruined what should have been. I mean, you only get one shot at that. You can't say, Terrence, come back next year, let's do it again. There's one shot at that. One. And they blew it. And Josh Whitman apologized, and he said something before Underwood's press conference started. It's not right. It's not right. It's not cool. And it bothers me more today than it did in the moment, in which I thought, wow. I even said to my friend, I don't believe in karma necessarily, but if you did, that ain't good for the second half. Well, it's like the building never recovered. That's no excuse for how the team played because they just sucked. In the second half, they just stunk up the joint. And they weren't out there for the ceremony. You think any of them are like, oh, my God, his jersey's upside down. However, are we going to go out and perform in the second half? Of course not. But that is just an absolute blunder of mammoth proportions. And I appreciate Whitman apologizing for it. As he said, I didn't hang it, but everything here is my responsibility. He was pissed. Whoever did that, I wouldn't normally be so mean as to say fire them. But yeah, fire them. I know there's some conspiracy theorizing on Twitter about what if it was intentional. You know, because last year when Terrence came back, and that was based on the injunction in court, was everybody in the athletic department happy about that? Well, I don't know how much credence I'd put to any of that. If that were true, then that's a despicable thing for whatever person might have done that intentionally, if that happened. But intentional or not, it's inexcusable. You check that multiple times before you roll it up. And I'm sure that Josh Whitman thought, well, I got people on the case, so I don't need to make sure that the thing is right side up and not upside down. But it was upside down. And it's a one-shot deal, and they just screwed the pooch. Guys, last night was terrible. There is no sugarcoating. There's no, well, listen, regroup and get him back in Wisconsin. You aren't going to get him back in Wisconsin. You are not. This team is not in any position. They're not in any shape to go up to Wisconsin and get a win. They are in no shape to really probably keep it close with Duke. This is a team that is completely floundering right now, despite having elite talent, and that all goes back to the head coach, and I have lost all faith in Brad Underwood as a game coach. I just have. And if you want to say, well, what's a moment that might have broke a coach in the eyes of a fan base? I thought Loyola was that for a long time. And it took until making an Elite Eight, or really, winning the Big Ten regular season title. That was big. And that was the next year. Making an Elite Eight. That completely, not completely, but mostly washed away the stink of the Loyola loss. Okay, Brad Underwood can win in March. But as I sit here right now, I don't have any faith in Brad Underwood as a game coach. And I hate that. But there's just nothing for me to glean onto and say, yeah, I like what Brad did there. I like that. That's not there. So short of him accruing the most talented roster, like Anthony Davis, John Calipari, that Kentucky team, because I'm seeing Underwood get compared to John Calipari, I would take a Coach Cal kind of run from Brad Underwood, but we seem to be getting late-stage John Calipari with Brad Underwood, not peak John Calipari, the late Memphis, early Kentucky years. We're getting late-stage Calipari with Underwood. Now, you could do worse, and there's always a risk that if you don't have Brad Underwood, who are you going to have instead, and are they going to be any better? That's a great question. I don't know. And earlier this year, I've said I wouldn't trade Brad Underwood for most other coaches, and that was based on the fact that he was getting dudes that others were not getting consistently. And I didn't think he was necessarily a bad game coach, but maybe he is. Maybe he's just a bad game coach. And if you have aspirations of winning a national title, that's not going to do it. So I would understand any be careful what you wish for argument. I would. And even I would caution fans that would say fire Brad Underwood. Because one, that's not going to happen. Two, I don't think it should happen yet. And three, sure, it could get worse. But if Josh Whitman is who I think he is, he's not, well, it could get worse kind of guy. He's, it could be better. And that's why I would love to be a fly on the wall in the end-of-season conversation with him and Underwood and see just how forceful Whitman would be about changes needing to be made. Brad, you are the face and CEO of this program, and you're very good at many of aspects of this job, but your team had deficiencies this year. How do you plan to address it? I mean, when you're paying a guy that much money, it is okay to hold his feet to the fire. It is. And what has made this season all the more frustrating is the accountability that Brad Underwood is taking is for the most simplistic garbage in post-game press conferences that if there was a Madden equivalent for college basketball, a 12-year-old would figure out on his Xbox before Brad Underwood would figure out in minute 30 of a game. I mean, this is kid stuff. And he just shrugs and, oh, man, I take accountability, but I don't know what to do. I don't know, man. You're the coach. Figure it out. You got an entire staff. Do they watch game? What do they do? What does Zach Hamer, if that's his name, I don't know, I keep hearing it. What does he do? What is this defensive guru doing? What's Tyler Underwood doing? Well, Tyler's probably not going to get fired. Best case is he probably gets a gig somewhere else and goes and learns how to be a coach. But the optics aren't good when you don't score a single point for 8.5 minutes and the offensive boy wonder, who is the coach's son, is sitting right next to the coach on the sideline. If that bothers you, that's okay. It should. It should bother you because it's just, it reeks of like, now it's like, I never would equate Tyler Underwood to Miles Smith. Remember, linebacker coach, right? Never done it before, but Lovey's like, hey, son, you want a job as a linebacker coach for a Big Ten university. I don't know. Maybe it's not that ridiculous of a comparison when you look at an offense that, despite two first-round picks that are ridiculous offensive talents and some good post players, you can't score a damn point for 8.5 minutes. Can't do it. I don't know. YouTube, thank you guys for being patient as I just ramble on. Jesus, I've been doing this for a half hour. Let me get some coffee. All right. On the YouTube feed. From K. Andrew. I love Brad having a problem with chucking mindless threes, but leaving 2 timeouts on the board when he didn't call a single one that whole collapse to say, hey, guys, let's not chuck mindless threes. He sat back and watched a team all year that needed to be coached. That is fair, K. Andrew. I cannot dispute that. From Ryan, Tyler and his buddies have to go this offseason. Get an adult in there who can steer this offense correctly. Fair. From Worrell, the 964, there are far too many distractions. The Jersey retirement could have waited. The son is a primary assistant coach, not playing Trey. Unacceptable. You know, World, here's how I view it. Brad Underwood this year has not been able to get out of his own way. The Trey White thing is the latest. I mean, I don't know what happened, but we can call it what it probably is. I mean, you watch enough college basketball and you see, oh, why is that player not playing? I think probably did something to piss off coach. And maybe it was legit, maybe it wasn't. I saw Trey White cheering wildly for his team yesterday. You know, in this NIL climate, that's going to happen where you bring in a player and adjustments are going to have to be made. You kind of figure out who they are and they figure out who you are. So I would not have an issue with the Trey White thing if the rest of the culture seemed to be okay, but the rest of the culture seems to suck right now. So how are we going to pinpoint Trey White and say, you're the locker room cancer or whatever it may be, and say you're playing 0 minutes, despite the fact that we could actually use someone like you out there? I mean, Trey White against Michigan State, not a bad matchup, I wouldn't think, given his size, given his ability to defend. But the problem is you haven't played him hardly at all. So Brad Underwood is correct in saying, well, I need to do a better job getting them back into it. Well, Brad, it's February 15th. How much more season do you think you have? Where's the urgency with this guy? I don't get it. All these comments reek of someone who thinks we're in November still. There's no urgency from him. Boy. Thank you, world. From Jacob. Tim Anderson is a huge distraction and loss this team can overcome. Well, that is an interesting defection, Jacob, at the end of, or before the season began, and Tim Anderson was there yesterday. Ian says, it's just disappointing. You remind me of a parent. I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. I'm both, Ian. I'm mad and disappointed. Also from Jacob, we're going to get boat raced in both games this week. Yes, we are. Call it what it is. This is not good timing. From K. Andrew, let's remember that before last year and up to when Jay Wright told him how to manage his team last December, Illini Nation asked, what happens if Brad misses another Sweet 16? K. Andrew, I had tweeted out, and it's in the book, and I'm holding myself accountable because that's what Brad Underwood would want me to do. And I said, halftime of the Valparaiso game when they were beating us, I said, it's just a big nothing burger. It's the same old with Brad Underwood. Well, you're right. They did fix it. And credit to Underwood for taking the advice. Credit to Jay Wright for giving it. But, yeah, if they had not made the Elite Eight last year, can you imagine the extra heat during this conversation right now? I think there'd be a lot more. From Dave, my biggest macro worry is the culture is deteriorating. Everyday guys is a meaningless slogan when DGL still gets a little time. Ty is redshirted in favor of yearly transfer Trey White. Better keep Merez. Dave, if they lose Merez, mutiny. Absolute mutiny, and you should. I don't want to hear everyday guys, and Dave, you make a great point. I don't want to hear that garbage. I've never believed in it with Brad Underwood. I appreciate the fact that he had a lot of talent and won a lot of games, but consistency was not necessarily their thing from game to game. So Everyday Guys has always fallen on deaf ears for me. From Jacob. Oh, that was about Bart Torvik. I know Jacob's got some stuff later. From World, Dre, Trey, and Ty need to look out for number one in transfer. I mean, they're going to consider it. They should. Ryan, if this is the cost of football success, I would rather not have it. Ryan, we can have both. We can have both. And also from Ryan, Brad is doing a hell of a job recruiting for any team in the nation that wants Dre next year. Yeah, no doubt. From K. Andrew, a few things here. I just don't think a 7-man rotation works for any offensive system that's based off of pace and tempo. We had to tell playing tough defense to go F itself to save energy for human beings who get tired. This year, I look at our best games. This year, you had 9 guys close to double-digit minutes in all of our most enthralling wins. That's true. And now you've shortened the rotation despite a healthy injury report. It's clean, and you're playing 7. I don't get it, Andrew. From Delectable Danny Penataro, DGL has gone to Mizzou or Northwestern. Gonna haunt Brad. Wouldn't shock me. DGL's mom might have a point. I mean, she's a firecracker. That's just one of many, many issues with Brad Underwood this year. It's been an abysmal coaching job for what looked to be a pretty damn good coaching job through the new year. It did. And since the USC game, garbage. Just garbage. I have no faith. I hate that. I really do. I have been going against my worst instincts and trying to be level about Brad Underwood and saying this is what he's good at. These are areas in which he can improve, right? Positive language. These are areas in which he can improve. I don't think some of those areas he is capable of improving in. It is what it is at this point. The guy is no spring chicken when it comes to coaching. You'd like to think all that experience would lend itself to a little bit better game day coaching performance than what you get from him, but you don't. So at this point, it is what it is. And game day coaching-wise, it ain't good enough. Man, how did we get here? I mean, I don't necessarily know how this team gets fixed. I mean, and that's fine, okay? Not every season's great. I get it. But, again, it'd be one thing if, oh, well, this collection of players just isn't quite working. No, it's that there was always this lingering thread underneath all of this about how good of a coach is Brad Underwood. And now that's louder than ever. And we're going to go into another uncertain offseason. And we'll see. I mean, he's going to get a chance to do it again. And he should get a chance to do it again, I would think. That's a reasonable thing for him to get another chance. But I don't think it's unfair to go into next year saying, dude, you either win or get the hell out. Because it's a different game. If we were talking the Bruce Weber era, and Bruce Weber were having this kind of success, Bruce Weber would not have gotten fired because that was a different era in which it was traditional college basketball recruiting. And, yeah, you wouldn't have been the Final Four good Illini, and there would have been frustrations certainly with Bruce Weber, who could drive you nuts. But we need to stop pretending that we're living in a traditional college basketball landscape and start acknowledging that this is where we're at with a budget that can go get dudes. The question is, can you get another coach that could bring in dudes to the same level of Brad Underwood and would be able to maximize them better than he is? And that's where the risk would lie. That's why Josh Whitman isn't going to just say, that's it, Brad, I'm sick of you, get out of here. The only other thing that could happen, and this is no inside information or anything, so this is purely speculative, don't take this and run with it, but at a certain point, does Brad Underwood think, yeah, I'll go to like Miami, low pressure gig, last college head coaching job. In other words, is Brad Underwood married to the idea of being a legacy guy at Illinois? I don't know. That's only a question he would be able to answer. He was mobile by necessity in his coaching career, so it's not as if he's ever stayed at one place overly long. But I do just wonder if you are Brad and another team throws you a lot of money, and in some cases, why wouldn't they? If Miami says, we're going to throw you this much money, and, well, we got an NIL budget to boot, and it's part of the reason that Jim Larinaga left, then maybe something like that or a similar school would be attracted to him. And then Josh Whitman, I mean, ask yourself this. Would Josh Whitman be sad or excited at the proposition of Brad Underwood leaving on his own accord and being able to hire another coach? I'm sorry, as I sit here today, I don't think Josh Whitman would be sad. I mentioned this undercurrent that's been here since Underwood's been here, despite the success of, is he a good game coach? You know, and that's an undercurrent. But on top of that, his tenure here has been very mercurial, up and down and up and down. And even in the good years, the down is just like wildly frustrating. And there just seems to be these little distractions that just drive you nuts. And when he's winning, this is the old conundrum that every fan faces. When he's winning, all those foibles or things that would drive you nuts otherwise don't. It's like, oh, that's Brad. He's got a chip on his shoulder. He's got some swagger. That's our Brad Underwood. But when he's not winning, it drives you batty. It drives you nuts. So I say all that and try to caution myself about any sort of rash decisions about Brad Underwood, or even pondering, well, how would you feel if Brad Underwood left on his own accord? Because I know this morning, if you said that to me right now, Brad Underwood goes somewhere else this offseason, I'd say, you know what? I mean, I appreciate what he did, but I'm kind of ready for something new. That's what I would say this morning. But if enough time passed, I'd probably say, whoa, Carp, chill out. That's not reasonable. And that's where I'm waffling, right? It's the immediacy of a reaction after a game like last night, and actually after a lot of games this year. It's the immediate reaction and the building underlying frustrations with Brad Underwood and his flaws. But then on the other hand, saying, wait a second, you know that if he goes, it could be worse than this. I mean, you're having fun going to the games and all that, and it's mostly good to be an Illini basketball fan, and yeah, it is at the moment. I feel like last night was consequential. I mean, and I'm going to get to the Twitter responses here in just a minute. I wonder what long-lasting effect last night has on this fan base's view of Brad Underwood. If you were at the stadium, it was an ugly scene when you left. I'll give you an anecdotal example. We're leaving, my buddy Colin and I, and we're walking out. We're just like, God, that sucked. You know, that was basically the drive home. God, that really sucked. Varying degrees of, man, that sucked. Sometimes our voices got louder, sometimes quieter, but we maintained that general narrative. We're walking out. There was about to be a fight between Illini fans. There was some guy in his 50s, and a bunch of like college kids were talking to him, and I don't know what had happened, if some Crush kids were leaving, and he talked to them or vice versa, but there was about to be a fight, and I look at Kyle, I'm like, I'm not getting in the middle of this. Like, they can have at it. Beat the crap out of each other if that's what you're going to end up doing. That was ugly in there, and I don't think that all of a sudden we wake up tomorrow or we wake up Tuesday, and certainly not Wednesday after the Wisconsin game, and say to ourselves, you know what, actually, yeah, Brad's not perfect, but he's pretty good. I don't know what gets Illini fans back to that point. There's been this sometimes misconstrued, sometimes not, perspective that I have had it out for Brad Underwood for a long time. And part of what I was very, very loud about in the book was that this is a golden age of Illini basketball, historically, that he helped us through in the last 5 seasons. I mean, monumental success, where you were very good to great on occasion. And yet, man, you get to that point. On one hand, he raised the bar, so he gets credit for that. But he's not coming close to achieving the bar he set for himself. So where do you go with that? How much leash do you give a guy to fix it and get back to the level that he wants to be at, and certainly us as a fan base want to be? I mean, that's a question we're going to continue to have, I think. Cody, good to see you, bud. Absolutely brutal loss to witness in person last night. I walked out of State Farm Center venting at a new level to my buddy I went with. You and many others, Cody. It was a low point, and I've been to a lot of games there, and it was a special atmosphere until it wasn't. From Czar, now that we have NIL, I think being a great recruiter is less important than being a great game coach. Czar, here's the thing. Is Mark Pope at Kentucky, bad loss last night, notwithstanding, is he a great recruiter? I mean, I don't know. Is BYU, who's even coaching BYU right now? They got AJ Ibanza. They got Igor Denham this year. You think that the coach at BYU is why they went there? No. They went there for money. So, I don't know. I tend to agree, Czar, where sure, I'd be a little concerned about if they have another guy leading this program, how is he going to acclimate to NIL? Well, Brad Underwood, what he did fantastically is bridge the gap from a pre-NIL to an NIL era. I will always give him credit for that. I thought he managed that about as well as one could when it was in its infancy. But you do wonder, going forward, if you got the Icon Collective with a crap ton of money and you got money to burn with revenue sharing and all that, I don't know. Can't any coach get that done? Don't you have a natural sell as a program? This is not prototypical college sports. This is semi-professional, borderline professional sports now. I think there's something to that, Czar. From Jacob, just read somewhere that Underwood's buyout is $30 million. Is that right? Boy, I don't know, Jacob. I'm sure it's substantial, and I don't fault Whitman for making that move when he did. From K. Andrew, also, 5-7 Kentucky football out-earned national champion Kentucky basketball in 2012. Oh, I see what you're saying, K. Andrew, an earlier point that you made. Football funds, entire athletic department. College football revenue is emperor, not just king. Don't want to choose and don't think we will have to, but if I had to choose major success, it's football. So Andrew was referring to an earlier comment there. From Jacob, where do we go from here? Everything feels broken unless we start hitting shots. We might win one game the rest of the way. Iowa. Yeah, it is broken, Jacob. I mean, it just is. It just is. Yeah, I don't know, guys. This sucks. I mean, I even got home, and it's funny. Our Wi-Fi went out with 5 minutes to go in the game, so my wife was watching it. I texted her on the way home. I was like, you guys just kicked our butt. And I got home, and I was like, I haven't been this pissed off in a while. I haven't with Brad Underwood and this basketball team. I'm pissed. It's just not good enough. All right, I got a tweet. Well, hold on a second. I want to read this from Illini Frank. He had said that he had some feedback he wanted to send, but it was too long to send via tweet. So I sent him a DM thing. But I want to read this, Frank, and I'll try to get this out there. My hypothesis is that Brad is a program guy, not a pro coach. Last year's team had many more guys that played or practiced with each other more than one season. The new guys were Damask, Harmon, and the freshmen, DGL, Hansberry, Moretti. In contrast, this year, the only program guys returned are Rogers and DGL. So I wonder if Brad had two decisions at the end of last season. This is all conjecture, but one, keep Chester and build around DGL, Danger, Hansberry, Hawkins, Rogers, Goody, and Harris, who, on paper, look like more of a high-floor team, but no real proven star. Or two, take another bite at the March Madness apple, gamble on a pro star talent, and rebuild the rest of the roster with whatever NIL could have afforded. Everyday guys' culture be damned. I wonder if Whitman encouraged him to go with choice two, hoping to strike while the iron was hot, getting boosters and NIL sponsors to buy into the offseason buzz on the heels of an Elite Eight. So we got Orlando and got Tommy, Riley, KJ, and a merry band of mercenaries, and bet on himself and his coaches to make these guys have chemistry and mesh into everyday guys in a few months. Hawkins, Goody, and Danger get nudged out. Chester takes his boys and leaves, seeing this new direction. Izzo clearly took a different route and bet on his culture, bringing in only Zapala and Fiddler. You know who's proven and capable of making a group of free agents and mercenaries mesh quickly? NBA coaches, not college coaches. Anyway, that's my hypothesis. Love the pod. Thank you, Frank. That was a great message there. I appreciate you sending me that, and I agree with most of those points. Before I get out of here, I asked for the listener mailbag, which I apologize for not doing that last week. I completely butchered that. I got to the end of the podcast and realized, oh, crap, I didn't do that. But what I did ask, folks, was on a scale of 1 to 10, how angry are you today? All right. From Cody, who is here. Oh, I said, how peeved are you? Cody said, peeved is definitely the PG version. Yes, I like the word peeved, though. Notice, I did say bitch and moan earlier, but, that's PG-13. I don't think that gets the adult advisory, parental advisory sticker for podcast. Jacob, who's in here, says, it's a 9. Underwood makes too many excuses to be paid to be a top 12 coach. Things happen in a season to lots of teams, and they don't collapse like this. If you can't fix it by next year, then it's going to have to change. From David, 10. Once the lead was built, the team fell back into chucking threes, especially inexcusable when we were in the bonus for the final 13 minutes. That's on the staff, and his regular inability to manage his players' shot selection is quickly spiraling into BU's worst coaching job of his tenure. From Isaac, our good friend Isaac, 8. Would be 10 if we didn't beat OSU, UCLA, and Minnesota. Teams should be playing their best heading into March. P.S. It's a 10 if you factor in the banner snafu. From Ethan, 10 being the most peeved, 12. I haven't been this upset after a game in a very long time. Upset enough that I had to tell my wife to please stop talking on the way home. Oof. Upset enough that every time I see anything about the game last night, my blood starts to boil. I'm so freaking pissed after last night's performance that I feel foolish for thinking after a 2-game sample that we were back. After last night's game, I genuinely will be surprised if we beat anyone else in the regular season besides Iowa. And if we lose to Iowa, fire everyone. Damn. From Fedigator, just a brilliant choice of GIF, 11. Spinal Tap. I really appreciate that, Fedigator. From, let's see what else here, Ben. Pick any number you want. It might be in the triple digits at this point. Brad continues to be arrogant and either deflect responsibility or say non-answers like we have to be better. Make changes mid-game, adapt, and do something with the talent you've amassed. It's embarrassing. Thank you, Ben. Oh, this is also from Dan, who replied to him. Don't forget to add that he had to apologize again to Dre repeatedly for being benched for his good energy, hard work, productivity, and dedication to the team. For Jake Davis, Ben, and Kylan, who shot twice yesterday and didn't score. I guess Dre must be bad at practice. From M. Bratz. I rather suspect the jersey ceremony took every bit of our team's presence and flushed it. Near impossible to imagine that I have video of the best crowd noise that building has ever seen just before the air was let out of the building. From Eric. Had they not shown so much promise earlier in the season, would not be as bad. But the rotation has me scratching my head. That's the most frustrating thing at this point. From Robert. And the only positive is they've sufficiently diminished expectations, so no reason to hope for a good run in March. Guts says they lose in round 1, shooting 4 of 35 on threes. From Ryan, on a scale of 1 to 10, 30. From a 16-point lead to a 14-point loss. No real hope in sight, and not really a win left on the schedule. Ready to finish this up and wipe our hands of this group, hoping quite a few choose not to return next year. From Harold, 10. Very disappointed. All great Illini teams have owned our home court. This is unacceptable. We're becoming Kentucky without the rich basketball history. We have NBA draft picks and very little team cohesiveness. From Mike, after being outscored by 30 points in the final 30 minutes, I'm at a 10. From David, 8, but more disappointed. Everyone in the building knew they needed to do that, and there is no accountability. I liken it to the movie Hoosiers. How many passes are we going to make? Same here. If the ball does not touch the paint before a shot, sit the bench. From Greg, 9. Illinois had -2 in the final 6 minutes in a home game in which you had to win, had a -2 points, correct, with the goaltend call, Greg. Yeah, you're right. Which you had to win given the impossible rest of your schedule. Self-reflection on what should have been done in postgame won't change outcome in actual game time. Adjust now. From Gary, less than it should be. They are where they are and refuse to play to their strengths consistently. From Scott, I'm immune at this point. The coaching staff has let this team down with their inability to adapt to what this team does best, work inside out. From Bryce. This is damning, Bryce. Cancel YouTube TV. This team isn't worth $90 a month or whatever it is. From Mac. Double Mac. 8. We knew this team would have ups and downs, but as a whole, they have been more disappointing than expected. I blame Underwood and staff for roster construction and, frankly, bad in-game coaching, which has always been a struggle during his tenure. From David. I'm not actually ticked. I'm disappointed, and I don't know which is a worse feeling. Brad didn't miss all those shots. There's plenty of blame for him, but it's on the players too. David, I get that, but man, February 15th, while the players could be better, to me, it starts at the top. Nothing's getting better. From Corey, 10, especially if you count the botch TSJ ceremony. Illini fan, a literal comedy of errors last night. Big changes need to be made. Dave, 10. It's inexcusable that Brad allows the team to chuck as many threes as they do when they suck at making them. It's lazy coaching, lazy offense by the players. I'm sick of the excuses. Brandon, he's at a million out of a 10. Joe at a 12. Ian at an 8. He says it seems fair. Might be a 9 if I didn't catch MSU plus 900 on the money line. Well played, Ian. Elliot, I remember Bielema saying he got rid of Peterson because you should be making the other team adjust to you, not the other way around. It feels like Brad tries to make adjustments to the opponent rather than staying a step ahead and forcing them to consistently adjust to us. Keon just posted a picture of Brad Underwood upside down. Well played. Big Angry Fish, 8. The double douche. What a name. 9. From Austin, 9.9. The times this team has done something that works and revert back to old ways of checking threes, mind-boggling. I count 5-6 games that we should have won this season, but spent the better part of the second half shooting contested threes coupled with long droughts. Man, you guys were on one today. Holy moly, people are pissed. From C. Vance, 9, mainly because Brad postgame said they should have went in the paint more. Duh. Make that adjustment in-game. If you shoot a 3, then you sit the bench. From Jim, 9. Greg, 15. Dave, probably about a 7, because I just feel Underwood isn't a good tactical coach, and when he had to adjust, there's problems. You move the ball so well inside at the beginning of the game, then they shot threes. Then, paraphrasing, he says he's not happy with the team's looks. From Randy, there is nothing in Underwood's body of work that suggests he can adjust on the fly and find the right combination of players to counter the opponent during a game. Case in point, he couldn't figure out how to stop a 30-point UConn run. He lacks in-game coaching chops. Steve is at a 9.99. Jay Vane is at a 20. And Dan says, doesn't even hit the scale. Brad, answer me one question. How the F does Dre get 3 minutes? Show me the analytics, and I'll show you the box score again. He only brought Dre in once for the media timeout, then took him back out. Jake and Kylan did what? Trade 2. What the F? Hey, now, Dan, I thought Jake had a good game. It sucks, guys. It sucks. And I don't know. I don't believe in Brad Underwood right now. I don't. We'll end it at that. 200 Levels brought to you by Hamilton Walkers in downtown Champaign. Steak, seafood, and spirits. Also, State Farm agent Brian Hansen online at brianismyguy.com. Also got to thank Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend at 217-841-4728. And finally, Owen Builders, LLC, online at owenbuildersllc.com. If you want to support the pod, please support our sponsors. Thank you, YouTube, for checking in on this cold, crap-ass Sunday morning. Illinois basketball, man. I don't know where we're going with Brad Underwood. It stinks. And I don't like it one bit, and we're not going to be here Tuesday night. We'll do a pod on Wednesday in the aftermath of the Wisconsin game, whatever happens with that, but I don't expect much. And at this point, it is what it is, and lick your wounds and make some changes in the offseason. And it's only February 15th, and I hate that I'm saying it so early, but that's kind of what it feels like. Have a good rest of your weekend. Maybe you got a 3-day weekend like I do. I got President's Day off. Stay warm, stay safe, cleanse the palate from Illini basketball for a while, and appreciate you tuning in, and hopefully this provided some sort of catharsis. It is the 200 level. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good rest of your weekend, okay?